When we talk about anxiety, most people describe it like an intruder, something to fight off, shut down, numb, or escape. But what if that approach has it all backward? What if anxiety isn't the enemy, but the messenger? What if it's not a malfunction, but one of the most intelligent alarm systems your body and mind have? Think about it. Your body is wired for survival. Every emotion it produces has a purpose. Pain keeps you from physical danger. Hunger drives you to eat. Fatigue tells you when to rest. And anxiety, though uncomfortable, functions the same way. It's a signal, a compass. It says something isn't safe, something is unresolved, something needs your attention. And when you begin to look at anxiety not as a flaw in your wiring, but as an alert system trying to protect you, the entire conversation changes. You stop asking, how do I make this go away? And start asking, what is this trying to show me? From a physiological perspective, anxiety is the activation of your sympathetic nervous system, what we often call fight or flight. It prepares your body to deal with a perceived threat. Your heart rate rises, your breathing quickens, blood is redirected from digestion to your muscles, your focus narrows. In an emergency, that system can save your life. The issue arises when that alarm keeps ringing, when the threat is psychological, emotional, or imagined, and your body doesn't know how to shut it off. Modern life constantly triggers this response. Financial pressure, overstimulation, emotional trauma, information overload, and we're taught to push through, to distract, to self-medicate, but the body doesn't forget. When we ignore the signal, the body doesn't back off. It gets louder, first with discomfort, then with tension, then with symptoms. This is where natural healing begins, not with external tools, but with internal awareness. What if, instead of running from anxiety, you paused and turned toward it? What if you asked, what is this sensation asking for? Maybe it's rest. Maybe it's truth. Maybe it's unresolved grief or unexpressed emotion. Maybe it's the body's way of saying, you can't carry this anymore. From a psychological perspective, anxiety often arises when we resist what is, when we fear the future, suppress the past, or feel disconnected from our sense of control. It's the mind's attempt to grasp what it can't predict, and the body's attempt to contain what hasn't been processed. And yet, beneath all of this is a profound truth. Anxiety is trying to protect you. It may be misfiring, it may be misplaced, but the intention is self-preservation. That insight alone can be healing, because when you stop fighting yourself, when you start listening instead of silencing, you begin to unwind the cycle. Now, this doesn't mean anxiety is something you should accept as a permanent state. It means you must approach it with respect before you can effectively treat it. Because anything you approach with fear becomes stronger. Anything you meet with understanding begins to soften. So let's reframe the goal. The goal isn't to eliminate anxiety completely, it's to re-educate your body and mind to recognize real threat versus imagined threat. It's to teach your system how to return to safety, not just intellectually, but physically. And that starts with building trust inside yourself. This is why natural remedies are so powerful, not because they sedate or suppress, but because they support regulation. They honor the message without silencing the messenger. Breathwork, for instance, tells your nervous system we're not in danger. Herbal adaptogens gently nudge your stress hormones back into balance. Movement discharges adrenaline. Connection reactivates oxytocin. Nature restores perspective. But none of these will have their full effect unless you begin from a place of internal alignment, unless you believe that your body isn't broken. It's trying to protect you in the best way it knows how. And perhaps the most philosophical truth in all of this is this. Anxiety is a call back to yourself, back to presence, back to embodiment, back to the wisdom of your own biology. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also precise. And when you stop fearing it, when you learn to decode it, it often reveals exactly what needs to shift, not in the world, but in you. So ask yourself, Am I willing to stop seeing anxiety as an intruder and start seeing it as a teacher? Can I let it guide me toward the imbalance rather than shame me into silence? Because the first and most natural remedy isn't something you swallow. It's something you remember. That your body is intelligent. That your emotions have logic. That anxiety is not weakness, it's awareness asking for your attention. And when you start listening, really listening, your body stops needing to scream. That's where healing begins. There's something incredibly profound and equally overlooked about the way we breathe. Most of us think of breathing as automatic, something the body does without our awareness. But what if I told you that your breath is actually the most direct and immediate way to reset your nervous system? What if your breath isn't just about oxygen, it's about access? Access to peace, to control, to presence. Especially when you're overwhelmed by stress or anxiety. Let's step back for a moment and consider the physiology. Your breath is the only function in the autonomic nervous system that you can consciously control. You can't directly slow your heartbeat or lower your blood pressure on command, but you can change your breath. And by doing so, you influence every other system connected to it. That's not just theory, that's the bridge between thought and biology. When you inhale deeply and exhale slowly, you send a signal to your brain that the environment is safe. And the brain, in turn, tells the body to deactivate the stress response. Heart rate slows, muscles release, cortisol levels begin to drop. Your parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for rest and digest, takes over. In real time, you transition from fight or flight into a healing state. Now consider the opposite. When we're anxious, our breath becomes short, shallow, and rapid. It rises into the chest and sometimes even into the throat. This triggers even more panic, even more stress. Your body feels like it's suffocating. Not always because there's not enough air, but because the rhythm of your breath has become disordered. And your body mirrors that chaos. Here's where the power lies. The moment you bring attention to your breath, really notice it, guide it, shape it. You begin to reclaim control, and that control isn't just physical, it's emotional. It's psychological. In many ways, learning to master your breath is learning to master your state of being. There's something philosophical in that too. Your breath lives in the present moment. You can't breathe yesterday's air. You can't borrow from tomorrow's. The breath pulls you into now, and now is where anxiety begins to dissolve. This is why almost every traditional healing system, from yogic science to Chinese medicine to modern somatic therapy, centers breath as the core of transformation. Because it reconnects the mind to the body. It interrupts the loop of fear, worry, and mental noise. It's a reset button you can press anytime, anywhere. 2. Simple techniques like box breathing, where you inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold again, have been shown to regulate heart rate variability, lower blood pressure, and reduce anxiety levels within minutes. Alternate nostril breathing balances the 2 hemispheres of the brain, calming overthinking. Even a single deep belly breath, if done with awareness, can change your biochemistry. You don't need expensive equipment, a prescription, or an appointment. You just need presence, intention, a willingness to pause and reconnect. And this brings us to something more subtle, something more emotional. Many people, when they're anxious, feel trapped. They feel they've lost control over their body, their thoughts, their reactions. But your breath gives you back that control. It reminds you that you are not helpless, you are not broken. You are equipped at all times with a tool that works from the inside out. The breath becomes more than a technique. It becomes a philosophy, a way of approaching life with rhythm instead of resistance, a way of softening instead of bracing, a way of living that welcomes presence rather than running from discomfort. But don't just take my word for it. Try it. The next time you feel that familiar grip of anxiety, your chest tightening, your thoughts racing, your palms sweating, stop. Place one hand on your belly. Inhale slowly through your nose. Feel the rise. Exhale through your mouth. Feel the release. Do it again. And again, watch how quickly your body responds. Watch how your mind begins to reorient. That's not placebo, that's physiology aligned with awareness. And if you make breath work a daily practice, not just a rescue tool, your baseline anxiety will begin to shift. Your nervous system becomes more resilient. You're not just reacting to life, you're engaging with it consciously, with rhythm, with grace. Because healing from anxiety isn't always about doing more. Sometimes it's about doing less, but doing it with deeper awareness. And the breath is the doorway. Every inhale is an invitation, every exhale, a release. So next time life feels overwhelming, don't search outward, go inward. Breathe, not just to survive, but to reclaim your space. In that breath, you'll find peace, and in that peace, you'll remember your power. When we think of treating anxiety or stress, many people assume the only solutions come in the form of prescriptions. And yes, in severe or clinically diagnosed cases, medication can be necessary and life-saving. But long before pharmacies existed, before laboratories and synthetic drugs, humans turned to the world around them, the soil, the roots, the leaves, the blossoms, for support. And these natural remedies then just soothed the body. They spoke to the soul. Today, science is catching up with what ancient traditions knew intuitively, that certain herbs have profound effects on the nervous system. They don't work like a switch. They work like a whisper. They nudge, they regulate, they support, without sedating, without dulling, and often without side effects. These are your herbal allies, and they're not magic, they're medicine in its most original form. Let's begin with one of the most researched and respected herbs for stress resilience, ashwagandha. Used for centuries in Ayurvedic medicine, ashwagandha is classified as an adaptogen. That means it helps your body adapt to stress, to change, to pressure, by regulating cortisol levels and supporting adrenal function. It doesn't just calm you down, it strengthens your ability to handle stress so that your body doesn't have to enter panic mode in the first place. Then there's chamomile, a humble flower with a powerful impact. Chamomile doesn't just make for a pleasant bedtime tea, it contains compounds that bind to the same brain receptors as certain anti-anxiety medications. Its gentle sedative properties don't knock you out, they invite you into calm. It's a reminder that sometimes softness is stronger than force. Passion flower is another remarkable ally, often used for racing thoughts, restless sleep, and circular anxiety. It works by boosting GABA levels in the brain, essentially quieting the nervous system's overactivity. And it does this without leaving you groggy or disconnected. You remain alert but centered. More infomai homai kolak. And who can forget lavender? Just the scent alone has been shown in clinical studies to reduce anxiety and even lower blood pressure. Taken as an oil, tea, or capsule, lavender doesn't numb emotion, it restores balance. Inhaling it, applying it to the skin, or even placing it near your bed can shift your physiology in real time. Finally, there's rhodiola rosea, another adaptogen known for its ability to improve stamina and mental clarity under stress. If anxiety for you feels like mental fog or emotional exhaustion, rhodiola may be the missing piece. It supports the mind's sharpness and the heart's endurance without overstimulating. What unites all these herbs is that they work with the body, not against it. They don't override the natural intelligence of your system. They support its return to balance. They're like a gentle hand on your shoulder saying, "You're okay, you can handle this." But as powerful as these herbal remedies are, they must be used with respect. Natural doesn't mean risk-free. Quality matters, dosage matters, and timing matters. Always consult with a trained herbalist or integrative health practitioner before starting any new supplement, especially if you're on medication or managing a condition. Herbs are not about escaping symptoms, they're about understanding the body's needs and meeting them gently. And there's something else that matters, something deeper. The ritual of herbal medicine, making tea, taking a tincture, sitting still and breathing in the scent of lavender. These are not just chemical interventions. They are acts of presence. Moments where you tell your body, I see you, I hear what you're feeling, and I'm responding with care. That in itself is medicine. In a world that's always rushing, always medicating, always numbing, herbs offer a different path, one rooted in relationship with your body, with the earth, and with the part of yourself that still remembers how to heal. We've been conditioned to believe that if something isn't fast, it isn't working. But healing isn't always fast. It's cyclical, it's seasonal, it's relational, and herbs teach us to trust that process. They don't shut the alarm off, they help us understand why it rang and then show us how to quiet it naturally. So if anxiety has made your world feel narrow, if stress has stolen your sleep or your spark, I invite you to explore the wisdom of these plant allies, not as a cure-all, but as a conversation. Let them support your breath. Let them steady your heart. Let them remind you that healing doesn't always come in force, it often comes in the quiet. Because sometimes the most powerful remedy isn't the one that changes everything overnight. It's the one that supports you consistently, gently, wisely, while you do the deeper work of becoming whole. Let nature walk with you. It knows the way back to calm. We often think of anxiety as something that starts in the mind, a thought, a worry, a fear, but in truth, many of our emotional states don't begin in the brain at all. They begin in the gut. And this connection between your digestive system and your emotional well-being is more than poetic. It's biological, it's chemical, it's real. Inside your gut are trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, viruses, that together make up what we call the microbiome. And these microbes aren't just passengers, they are active participants in your health. They help break down food, yes, but they also play a direct role in producing neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, all of which are critical for regulating mood, anxiety, and stress. In fact, nearly 90% of your body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter often associated with happiness and emotional stability, is produced in the gut, not the brain. That changes the conversation entirely. Because if your gut is inflamed, imbalanced, or depleted, your emotional regulation system suffers with it. This is not just a metaphor, it's a feedback loop. When the gut is out of balance due to poor diet, chronic stress, antibiotics, processed foods, or environmental toxins, it can lead to a condition known as leaky gut. This means the tight junctions in the intestinal lining become loose, allowing particles to leak into the bloodstream that don't belong there. The immune system then mounts an attack, triggering systemic inflammation. And here's the critical part. Inflammation doesn't stay in the body. It reaches the brain, it affects mood, it amplifies anxiety, it clouds clarity. So often, people come in seeking help for their anxiety, looking for solutions that only target the mind. But when we explore their diet, their digestion, their gut health, we find the real source of imbalance. You cannot calm the mind if the gut is in chaos. So how do we begin to restore this harmony? First, by removing what harms. Ultra-processed foods, refined sugar, artificial additives, and inflammatory oils damage the gut lining and feed the wrong bacteria. These aren't just bad for your weight or heart, they are bad for your mental health. Anxiety, in many cases, is a nutritional issue disguised as an emotional one. Then we introduce what heals. Fermented foods like kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, and yogurt reintroduce beneficial bacteria into the gut. Prebiotic fibers from foods like garlic, onions, bananas, and oats feed these good bacteria so they can flourish. Bone broth helps repair the intestinal lining. Hydration ensures the system functions smoothly. Probiotic supplements can also play a role, but not all are created equal. What matters is diversity and strain specificity. It's not about loading up on random pills. It's about understanding what your body uniquely needs. And that's where personalized care matters. Beyond nutrition, stress management is essential. Chronic stress reduces microbial diversity and alters gut motility. That means your digestion slows, your body absorbs fewer nutrients, and toxins linger longer than they should. This creates yet another feedback loop. Anxiety creates gut dysfunction. Even sleep plays a role. Studies show that gut bacteria follow circadian rhythms. Poor sleep disrupts their cycle and yours. Again, this is not just surface level wellness advice. This is integrated biology at work. Your body is a system, and systems must be treated as wholes, not parts. But here's something more philosophical to consider. The gut is often referred to as the second brain. And I'd argue that in many ways, it's the first. Long before you have a thought, you have a feeling, a sensation, a knowing. That comes from the body. The mind interprets. The gut knows. Think about how we speak. We say, I had a gut feeling. I can't stomach this. That situation made me sick. These aren't just expressions, they're insights. The body communicates through feeling, and the gut is its voice. When you care for your gut, you are not just improving digestion, you are restoring trust in your own inner voice. You are reducing the static in your nervous system so that clarity can emerge. You are no longer just treating symptoms, you are building resilience from the inside out. This is the future of mental health. Not separating mind from body, but recognizing their unity. Not numbing symptoms, but nourishing the source. True healing is not about escape, it's about alignment. So the next time anxiety rises, don't just ask, what am I thinking? Ask, what have I been feeding my body, my gut, my inner world? Because when you heal the gut, the mind often follows, and in that harmony, you'll find a peace that no pill can manufacture. Only your body can remember. One of the most underutilized yet profoundly effective natural remedies for anxiety and stress is movement. Not exercise in the traditional punishing burn calorie sense, but movement as medicine. Movement as emotional release. Movement as therapy. You see, the body stores emotion. And when we don't move, we don't just become physically stagnant, we become emotionally constipated too. We live in a world that celebrates intellectual achievement and productivity. We spend hours at desks, in cars, staring at screens, overusing our minds and underusing our bodies. And we wonder why anxiety feels so heavy. We wonder why it builds up. But the answer is simple. Energy that isn't released gets recycled. And if you don't move it out, it moves in deeper. The truth is, we were designed to move. Our ancestors walked, climbed, crouched, danced, hunted, gathered. Their movement wasn't about aesthetics. It was about function, expression, survival. And with every step, every stretch, every exertion, they regulated their stress without needing to label it as such. Today, we've outsourced that natural release to pills, entertainment, and endless scrolling. But your biology hasn't changed. Your nervous system still depends on movement to process emotion and restore balance. From a physiological standpoint, movement changes your chemistry. It boosts endorphins, those natural feel-good chemicals that relieve pain and improve mood. It increases the release of brain-directed neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which supports learning and emotional resilience. It helps regulate cortisol, the stress hormone that, when chronically elevated, becomes toxic to both body and mind. But movement does more than shift your brain chemistry, it shifts your state. Have you ever noticed how different your perspective feels after a long walk? How problems that seemed overwhelming start to shrink? That's not coincidence. That's biology aligning with motion. You step into a different rhythm and your nervous system follows. And the beauty of this remedy is that it's available to you at any time. You don't need a gym membership, you don't need perfect form, you don't even need a lot of time. What matters is consistency and intention. A 10-minute walk in fresh air, a few rounds of gentle yoga in your living room, dancing to music that moves your spirit. These are not just acts of leisure, they are acts of regulation. And in fact, certain forms of movement are especially effective for calming the anxious mind. Rhythmic, repetitive movement, like walking, swimming, cycling, has a hypnotic effect on the brain. It anchors you in your body and creates a natural meditative state. You breathe deeper, you think clearer, you feel more grounded, and in that state, anxiety begins to dissolve. Tai Chi and Qigong, for example, combine breath with slow, flowing movement. These ancient practices aren't just grateful, they're powerful tools for nervous system balance. They've been shown to lower blood pressure, reduce cortisol, and enhance emotional control, not by force, but by flow. Even strength training has benefits, helping release stored tension and rebuild a sense of agency. When you physically push against resistance, you symbolically train your body to push through life's stressors. You remember what it feels like to be strong, not just physically, but psychologically. Now here's something that isn't talked about enough. Movement is also an act of emotional hygiene. Just like you brush your teeth or wash your face, your emotions need cleansing too. Anxiety is not always caused by what's happening in your life. It's often caused by what you haven't yet released. Movement allows you to release what your words can't always articulate. That's why people cry during yoga, or feel light after a jog, or find clarity after a hike. The body is not separate from the mind. When you move the body, you help the mind move through its blocks. It's not an escape. It's a return to flow, to presence, to self. And let's not forget the deeper, more philosophical dimension. Movement is life. Stillness has its place. But when we stop moving entirely, physically or emotionally, we stagnate, we disconnect, we begin to forget who we are. Anxiety thrives in that disconnection. But movement reminds you, you're alive, you're capable, you're in motion, not stuck. So whether you're dealing with panic, unease, overthinking, or chronic stress, remember this: your body is not the problem, it's the path. Listen to it, engage it, trust it to help carry what your mind can't hold alone. Because sometimes the best way to change your mindset is to move your muscles. When the mind races, let the body lead. In motion, you'll rediscover stillness, not the kind that is frozen, but the kind that is earned, the kind that brings peace. We've talked about the body, we've talked about movement, breath, herbs, and even gut health, but let's shift now into something quieter, something more subtle, yet just as vital. In a culture addicted to doing, fixing, scrolling, and rushing, stillness may be the most radical remedy we have left. Stillness doesn't mean inactivity. It means intentional pause. A willingness to stop, not because you're giving up, but because you're tuning in. And that tuning in, that moment of silence between the noise, is where the nervous system finds its recalibration. Most people today live in a chronic state of overstimulation. We wake up to alarms, we check phones before we've taken our first breath of morning air, we consume information, music, opinions, images, endlessly. The brain in this state never gets to rest. And what's often labeled as anxiety is at times simply overload. The mind wasn't built to process this much, this fast, for this long. Now here's the good news. The body and brain can recover, but they need space, emotional space, cognitive space, and stillness provides that. In fact, science now confirms what wisdom traditions have known for millennia. Stillness heals. Meditation, mindfulness, even just a few minutes of intentional quiet lowers cortisol, slows heart rate, improves focus, and enhances emotional regulation. But more than that, it creates awareness. An anxious mind often loops because it's afraid to feel. It races ahead, overthinks, avoids. Stillness asks the opposite. It invites you to sit with yourself, not to escape, but to understand. When you sit quietly, you begin to notice the thoughts beneath the surface, the stories you've been telling yourself, the fear patterns, the emotional debris that never had time to clear. Stillness doesn't make you feel anxious. It reveals the anxiety that was already there. And that's a powerful opportunity. Meditation, for example, isn't about emptying the mind. That's a common myth. It's about watching the mind, becoming the observer rather than the reactor. Over time, this practice rewires the brain. It strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking, and reduces activity in the amygdala, the fear center. What does this mean practically? You become less reactive, less triggered, more grounded. You create a buffer between stimulus and response. That's the space where freedom lives. And it doesn't stop with formal meditation. Time in nature is another profound form of stillness, and it requires no training, no apps, no effort, just presence. Studies show that time in green spaces reduces cortisol, improves immune function, and boosts mood. But it's more than physiology. Nature reorients the mind. It restores perspective. You realize, standing under a vast sky or near a tree that's been alive longer than you, that your worries, though valid, are not everything. They are weather systems, and you are the sky. Even journaling is a stillness practice. When you write, not for an audience, but for yourself, you create space between the thought and the self. You externalize what was internal. You give language to what was chaotic. This is not just emotional expression, it's emotional regulation. The page becomes your mirror, and in that mirror you find clarity. Stillness also means boundaries. Emotional space from people, noise, input. Anxiety is often amplified by constant comparison and digital intrusion. Unplugging, even briefly, restores your internal signal. You stop absorbing what's out there and start listening to what's in here. And that's where answers live. But stillness isn't easy. For many, it feels threatening because in stillness, there are no distractions. Just you, your thoughts, your truth. But this is exactly why it's powerful. Stillness is where healing begins. Not through force, but through presence. Not by fixing, but by allowing. This brings us full circle. Anxiety is not just a mental issue, it's a signal from the whole self. The breath, the body, the gut, the spirit, they all speak. And stillness is how we listen. You don't have to escape your life to find peace. You just need to create pockets of silence within it, space where the nervous system can soften, where the mind can realign, where you can simply be. So take 5 minutes, sit without music, put the phone away, go outside, close your eyes, breathe, notice. That may not sound revolutionary, but in today's world, it is. Because healing isn't always about what you add. Sometimes it's about what you remove. Stillness isn't the absence of action. It's the foundation of all meaningful action. In silence, you remember your center. And from that center, you respond. Not with panic, but with presence. That is where peace begins.